In today's captivating story, a young millionaire asks a homeless man to pretend to be her boyfriend for a night at a high-profile event, leading to unexpected surprises. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel, and if you'd like to support us in creating more amazing content, please consider making a donation via the link in the pinned comment. Now, sit back and enjoy the story. Jasmine Blackwood, the 28-year-old heiress to the Blackwood fortune, hurried down the bustling streets of New York City. Her designer heels clicked against the pavement as she navigated through the sea of people, her mind racing with thoughts of the upcoming charity gala. As the chairwoman of the Blackwood Foundation, she was expected to make an appearance, but the thought of facing the crowd alone filled her with dread. Lost in her thoughts, Jasmine didn't notice the figure huddled in the alcove of a building until she nearly tripped over him. Startled, she looked down to see a man in tattered clothes, his weathered face partially hidden beneath a scraggly beard. "I'm so sorry," Jasmine apologized, reaching into her purse for some change. The man looked up, and for a moment, their eyes met. Jasmine was struck by the intensity of his gaze, a pair of piercing blue eyes that seemed to hold a story of their own. "No need for apologies, miss," he said, his voice surprisingly gentle and articulate. "I should have found a better spot to rest." Jasmine hesitated, her hand still in her purse. Something about this man intrigued her. "What's your name?" she asked. "Ethan," he replied. "Ethan Moore." An idea began to form in Jasmine's mind, a crazy, impulsive idea that she knew she would probably regret. But as she stood there, looking at Ethan, she couldn't shake the feeling that this encounter was somehow meant to be. "Ethan," she said, her heart racing, "I have a strange request. Would you be willing to listen?" Ethan raised an eyebrow, curiosity evident in his expression. "I'm all ears, miss." Jasmine took a deep breath. "I need a date for a charity gala tonight. It's a black tie event, and I can't face it alone. Would you consider pretending to be my boyfriend for the evening?" The words tumbled out before she could stop them, and Jasmine immediately felt foolish. She was about to apologize and walk away when Ethan slowly stood up, revealing his tall, lean frame. "A charity gala, you say?" he mused, a hint of amusement in his voice. "And you want me, a homeless man, to be your date?" Jasmine nodded, her cheeks flushing with embarrassment. "I know it sounds crazy, but I'll provide everything you need, a suit, shoes, even a makeover. And of course, I'll compensate you for your time." Ethan studied her for a long moment, his blue eyes seeming to look right through her. Finally, he smiled, a warm, genuine smile that transformed his entire face. "Miss, I've been on these streets long enough to know when an opportunity presents itself," he said. "I accept your offer, on one condition." "What's that?" Jasmine asked, both relieved and nervous. "That you tell me your name," Ethan replied with a chuckle. Jasmine couldn't help but laugh. "It's Jasmine Blackwood." As they shook hands, neither Jasmine nor Ethan could have predicted the series of events their impulsive agreement would set in motion. Events that would change both their lives forever. Jasmine led Ethan to her penthouse apartment, her mind racing with both excitement and apprehension. As they entered the luxurious space, she couldn't help but notice Ethan's wide-eyed amazement. "Make yourself at home," Jasmine said, gesturing to the living room. "I'll call my stylist and have everything we need delivered." While Jasmine made arrangements, Ethan wandered around the apartment, his calloused fingers hovering over the expensive furnishings without touching them. He paused at a wall of photographs, studying the images of Jasmine with various celebrities and dignitaries. "You really are somebody important, aren't you?" Ethan mused, his voice tinged with a mixture of awe and something else, perhaps a hint of sadness. Jasmine joined him, her phone call complete. "I suppose some people would say that," she replied softly. "But importance is relative, isn't it?" Before Ethan could respond, the doorbell rang. A team of stylists and designers swept in, arms laden with garment bags, grooming tools, and an air of purpose. "Let's get started," the lead stylist, Marco, announced, We don't have much time, but I promise you, we'll work miracles." The next few hours were a whirlwind of activity. Ethan was whisked away to the guest bathroom, where he was given a thorough grooming. His matted beard was trimmed and shaped, his hair washed and styled. As layers of grime were scrubbed away, a handsome face began to emerge, one with high cheekbones, a strong jaw, and those mesmerizing blue eyes. Meanwhile, Jasmine was bustling about, coordinating with the team and getting herself ready. She couldn't help but feel a flutter of anticipation in her stomach. What would Ethan look like when the transformation was complete? As the stylists worked their magic, Ethan and Jasmine engaged in conversation, learning bits and pieces about each other's lives. Ethan spoke of his past as a literature professor, hinting at a tragic event that had led to his current circumstances. Jasmine, in turn, shared her struggles with the weight of expectations placed upon her as the Blackwood heiress. "Sometimes I feel like I'm just playing a role," Jasmine confessed as her makeup artist applied the finishing touches. "Like the real me is hidden behind this facade of wealth and privilege." Ethan's eyes met hers in the mirror. "Perhaps tonight, we can both step into new roles and discover something about ourselves in the process." Finally, the moment of reveal arrived. Ethan stepped out of the guest room, and Jasmine's breath caught in her throat. Gone was the disheveled homeless man. In his place stood a dashing gentleman in a perfectly tailored tuxedo. His salt and pepper hair was styled impeccably, and his beard was neatly trimmed, giving him a distinguished air. "Ethan," Jasmine whispered, "you look like a different man," Ethan finished, a wry smile playing on his lips. "No," Jasmine said, shaking her head. "Like the man you've always been, just revealed." Their eyes locked, and for a moment, the world around them seemed to fade away. There was an undeniable connection between them, born from their shared vulnerability and the strange circumstances that had brought them together. The spell was broken by Marco clapping his hands. "Magnifico, you two look perfect together. Now, let's go over the details for tonight. You'll need a convincing story of how you met." As they crafted their fictitious romance, Jasmine couldn't help but wonder how much of what they were creating was truly fiction, and how much was an unexpected truth unfolding before their eyes. Little did they know the evening ahead would challenge everything they thought they knew about themselves and each other, leading to revelations that would shake the foundations of their worlds. The limousine glided to a stop in front of the Metropolitan Museum of Art, where the annual Blackwood Foundation Charity Gala was being held. Jasmine took a deep breath, her hand resting on the door handle. "Are you ready for this?" she asked Ethan, searching his eyes for any sign of hesitation. Ethan gave her a reassuring smile, his transformed appearance belying the nervousness he felt inside. "As ready as I'll ever be. Shall we?" As they stepped out onto the red carpet, a barrage of camera flashes greeted them. Jasmine instinctively reached for Ethan's hand, and he gave it a gentle squeeze. They made their way down the carpet, Jasmine's emerald gown shimmering under the lights, while Ethan cut a dashing figure in his tailored tuxedo. "Mrs. Blackwood, who's your date?" a reporter called out. Jasmine turned, her practiced smile in place. "This is Ethan Moore, my boyfriend. We've been keeping our relationship private, but we felt it was time to make our first public appearance together." Ethan nodded politely to the press, playing his part perfectly. As they continued walking, he leaned in close to Jasmine's ear. "You're quite good at this," he murmured. "Years of practice," she whispered back. "Just follow my lead, and we'll be fine." As they entered the grand hall, a hush fell over the crowd. All eyes turned to the unlikely couple, Jasmine Blackwood, the golden girl of New York's elite, and her mysterious new beau. Whispers began to circulate, speculation running wild about Ethan's identity and background. Jasmine's grip on Ethan's arm tightened as they made their way through the throng of guests. She nodded and smiled at familiar faces, making introductions when necessary. Ethan, for his part, carried himself with a quiet dignity that seemed to both intrigue and unsettle those around them. "Jasmine, darling," a shrill voice called out, A woman in her 50s, dripping in diamonds, approached them with open arms. "We've all been dying to meet your mystery man." Aunt Cordelia, Jasmine greeted her, accepting a air kiss. "This is Ethan. Ethan, my aunt, Cordelia Blackwood Smythe." Cordelia's eyes raked over Ethan, her smile never wavering. "Ethan, what a pleasure. And what is it that you do?" Before Ethan could respond, Jasmine smoothly interjected, "Ethan's a writer. He's working on a novel that's set to be published next year." "How fascinating," Cordelia purred, though her tone suggested she found it anything but. "And how did you two meet?" Ethan cleared his throat, deciding to take the lead. "It was at a small bookshop in the village. I was browsing the classic section when I quite literally bumped into Jasmine. We got to talking about our favorite authors. And, well," he smiled down at Jasmine, his gaze soft, comfortable in each other's presence. But beneath the surface, both Jasmine and Ethan were acutely aware of the precarious nature of their charade. Every touch, every shared glance, felt charged with an electricity that neither of them had anticipated. The line between pretense and reality was beginning to blur. As they stood near the bar, catching a moment alone, Ethan leaned in close. "You know, Jasmine," he said quietly, "I'm beginning to think that this evening might be more dangerous than either of us realized." Jasmine looked up at him, her heart racing. "What do you mean?" Ethan's blue eyes held hers, intense and searching. "I mean that sometimes, when we pretend to be something, we risk becoming it, and I'm not sure I'm ready for what that might mean." Before Jasmine could respond, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A latecomer had arrived, causing a stir among the guests. As the crowd parted, Jasmine gasped, her face draining of color. "Oh no," she whispered, her grip on Ethan's arm tightening painfully. "This can't be happening." Ethan followed her gaze, confusion etched on his face. "Jasmine, what's wrong? Who is that?" But Jasmine couldn't answer. Her eyes were fixed on the man striding confidently through the crowd, his gaze locked on her. In that moment, she knew that their carefully constructed facade was about to come crashing down around them. The man approaching Jasmine and Ethan was the epitome of sophistication. Tall, with salt and pepper hair and piercing green eyes, he moved with the confidence of someone accustomed to commanding attention. As he drew closer, Ethan felt Jasmine tense beside him. "Jasmine, my dear," the man said, his voice smooth as silk. "It's been far too long." Jasmine struggled to find her voice. "Alexander," she finally managed. I didn't know you were back in the country." Alexander's gaze shifted to Ethan, a flicker of curiosity in his eyes. "And who might this be?" Ethan stepped forward, extending his hand. "Ethan Moore, I'm Jasmine's." "He's my boyfriend," Jasmine interjected quickly, her voice stronger now. "Ethan, this is Alexander Winthrop. He's an old friend of the family." Alexander's handshake was firm, his smile not quite reaching his eyes. "Boyfriend? How interesting. I must say, Jasmine, you've been keeping secrets." The tension in the air was palpable. Ethan glanced between Jasmine and Alexander, sensing there was much more to their relationship than Jasmine had let on. "Perhaps we should find a quieter place to catch up," Alexander suggested, his tone leaving no room for argument. Jasmine nodded reluctantly, and the three of them made their way to a secluded corner of the ballroom. As they walked, Ethan noticed the curious glances and whispers following them. Clearly, Alexander's arrival had caused quite a stir. Once they were relatively alone, Alexander turned to Jasmine, his expression unreadable. "I must admit, I'm surprised. When I left for London 6 months ago, you were, shall we say, in a different place." Jasmine lifted her chin defiantly. "A lot can change in 6 months, Alexander." "Indeed," he murmured, his gaze flickering to Ethan. "And you, Mr. Moore, what is it that you do?" Before Ethan could respond, Jasmine cut in. "Ethan's a writer. He's incredibly talented." Alexander raised an eyebrow. "A writer? How Unconventional for you, Jasmine." Ethan, feeling increasingly uncomfortable with the undercurrents of the conversation, decided to take control. "Mr. Winthrop, forgive me, but I sense there's some history here that I'm not privy to. Perhaps it would be best if you and Jasmine spoke privately." Alexander's lips curved into a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "How very perceptive of you, Mr. Moore. Yes, Jasmine and I do have quite a history. In fact, until recently, I believed we had a future as well." Jasmine paled, her hand reaching for Ethan's instinctively. "Alexander, please." "You see, Mr. Moore," Alexander continued, his voice low and intense. "6 months ago, Jasmine and I were engaged to be married. It was all arranged, a merger of 2 of New York's most prominent families. And then, one day, Jasmine simply disappeared." Ethan felt as if the ground was shifting beneath his feet. He turned to Jasmine, searching her face for confirmation. The guilt and fear he saw there told him everything he needed to know. "I couldn't go through with it," Jasmine whispered, her eyes pleading with Ethan to understand. "I couldn't marry someone I didn't love, no matter what our families wanted." Alexander's laugh was bitter. "Love, my dear. People like us don't have the luxury of marrying for love. We have responsibilities, expectations." "No," Jasmine interrupted, her voice stronger now. "That's where you're wrong, Alexander. Meeting Ethan has shown me that there's more to life than living up to other people's expectations. He's taught me the value of authenticity, of being true to oneself." Ethan stood there, stunned by Jasmine's words. In that moment, he realized that their charade had become something real, something neither of them had anticipated. Alexander's eyes narrowed. "Is that so? Well then, perhaps Mr. Moore would like to share with us his background. After all, if he's to be part of your world now, Jasmine, we should know everything about him." The challenge in Alexander's voice was clear. Ethan felt trapped, knowing that the truth of his circumstances would shatter the illusion they had created. He looked at Jasmine, seeing the fear and desperation in her eyes. In that moment, Ethan made a decision. He squared his shoulders and met Alexander's gaze. "You're right, Mr. Winthrop. There is much about me that you don't know, but I can assure you, my feelings for Jasmine are genuine." As Ethan prepared to reveal the truth about his identity and background, he couldn't help but wonder, would this moment of honesty be the end of their brief, magical encounter, or the beginning of something far more profound? Ethan took a deep breath, his eyes moving from Alexander's challenging gaze to Jasmine's worried expression. The bustling gala seemed to fade into the background as he prepared to speak his truth. "Mr. Winthrop, Jasmine," Ethan began, his voice steady despite his racing heart. "You're right to question who I am. The truth is, I'm not the successful writer Jasmine introduced me as." Alexander's triumphant smirk was quickly replaced by confusion as Ethan continued. "Until this morning, I was homeless, living on the streets of New York. Jasmine quite literally stumbled upon me and, in a moment of, let's call it inspired desperation, asked me to be her date for tonight." A gasp escaped Jasmine's lips, her eyes wide with a mix of shock and something else, admiration, perhaps, for Ethan's courage. Alexander, for his part, looked thunderstruck. "You can't be serious," he sputtered. "Jasmine, is this some kind of joke?" Jasmine straightened her shoulders, a newfound resolve in her stance. "It's not a joke, Alexander. Everything Ethan's saying is true." As the words left her mouth, Jasmine felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The truth, as uncomfortable as it was, felt infinitely better than the web of lies they had been weaving. Ethan continued, his voice growing stronger. "What Jasmine didn't know when she made her impulsive offer was that I wasn't always homeless. Years ago, I was Dr. Ethan Moore, a professor of literature at Columbia University. This revelation caused a ripple of whispers among the nearby guests who had begun to eavesdrop on the intense conversation. I had a life not unlike yours, respected, comfortable, with a promising future ahead. But then tragedy struck. My wife and daughter were killed in a car accident, and I couldn't cope. I lost myself in grief and alcohol, eventually losing my job, my home, everything. Jasmine's hand found Ethan's, squeezing it gently in support. The gesture wasn't lost on Alexander, whose expression had shifted from shock to a grudging respect. "So you see, Mr. Winthrop," Ethan concluded, "I'm neither the successful writer Jasmine claimed me to be, nor am I simply a homeless man. I'm someone who lost his way and is now, thanks to an extraordinary act of kindness, finding his way back." A heavy silence fell over the group. Alexander was the first to break it, his voice surprisingly gentle. "Dr. Moore, I don't know what to say. Your honesty is commendable." Jasmine stepped forward, her eyes shining with unshed tears. "I had no idea, Ethan. But knowing this doesn't change how I feel. If anything, it makes me admire you even more." As the truth of their situation sank in, the energy around them began to shift. Guests who had been pretending not to listen now approached openly, their faces a mix of curiosity and compassion. One of them, an older woman Ethan recognized as a prominent philanthropist, spoke up. "Dr. Moore, your story is incredibly moving. Have you considered sharing it more widely? I believe it could inspire many people who are struggling." Before Ethan could respond, another guest chimed in. "I'm on the board of a rehabilitation center. We're always looking for speakers who can connect with our patients. Would you be interested?" Suddenly, what had begun as a potentially disastrous revelation was transforming into something entirely unexpected. People were gathering around Ethan, offering words of encouragement, business cards, and potential opportunities. Jasmine watched in awe as Ethan engaged with the crowd, his natural charisma and intelligence shining through. She realized that in trying to hide who he was, they had nearly missed discovering his true value. Alexander, observing the scene with a thoughtful expression, turned to Jasmine. "Well, my dear, it seems you have a talent for seeing the extraordinary in unlikely places. Perhaps I underestimated both of you." As the night wore on, the energy of the gala shifted. What had started as a typical high society event had become something more meaningful. Guests were engaged in earnest conversations about social issues, inspired by Ethan's story. Amidst the buzz of activity, Jasmine and Ethan found a moment alone. "I'm so sorry for putting you in this position," Jasmine said softly. "But I'm also incredibly proud of you for telling the truth." Ethan smiled, his blue eyes twinkling. "You know, Jasmine, I think this night might be the beginning of something neither of us expected." As they looked out at the transformed gala, both Jasmine and Ethan felt a sense of possibility they hadn't experienced in years. But little did they know, the night still held one more surprising twist that would challenge everything they thought they knew about each other and themselves. As the gala continued into the night, Jasmine and Ethan found themselves at the center of attention. Guests approached them constantly, eager to hear more of Ethan's story and to offer support or opportunities. Jasmine watched with a mixture of pride and amazement as Ethan handled each interaction with grace and humility. However, as the hours wore on, Jasmine began to notice something odd. Ethan seemed to be growing increasingly uncomfortable, his eyes darting around the room as if searching for something, or someone. When a waiter passed by with a tray of champagne, Ethan's hand twitched towards it before he quickly pulled back, a flash of pain crossing his face. Concerned, Jasmine gently touched his arm. "Ethan, are you all right?" He turned to her, his blue eyes clouded with an emotion she couldn't quite place. "Jasmine, I need to tell you something I should have said earlier." Before he could continue, a commotion near the entrance caught their attention. A woman had burst into the gala, her designer dress contrasting sharply with her disheveled appearance and frantic demeanor. Her eyes scanned the room wildly until they landed on Ethan. "There you are," she cried, pushing her way through the startled crowd. "Do you have any idea what you've put us through?" Ethan's face drained of color. "Rebecca," he whispered, his voice a mix of shock and guilt. Jasmine looked between Ethan and the woman, confusion etched on her face. "Ethan, who is this?" The woman, Rebecca, reached them, her eyes blazing with anger and relief. "I'm his wife," she spat. "His very much alive wife." A collective gasp rippled through the nearby guests. Jasmine felt as if the ground had dropped out from beneath her feet. But you said..." Ethan's shoulders slumped in defeat. "I'm so sorry, Jasmine. I lied about everything." Rebecca turned to Jasmine, her anger softening slightly as she took in the younger woman's shocked expression. "Let me guess, he told you some sob story about losing his family and ending up on the streets." Jasmine could only nod, still struggling to process what was happening. "It's his favorite tale," Rebecca continued, her voice bitter. "The truth is, Ethan here is Dr. Ethan Moore, all right, but he's not a former professor turned homeless man. He's a brilliant psychologist specializing in social experiments and human behavior." The pieces began to fall into place in Jasmine's mind, each revelation feeling like a physical blow. Rebecca wasn't finished. For the past year, he's been conducting an experiment on social perceptions and class differences. He's been posing as a homeless man, documenting how people from different walks of life treat him. But this time, she glared at Ethan. He took it too far, disappeared for days without a word. Ethan finally found his voice. "Rebecca, I can explain. This opportunity with Jasmine, it was too perfect to pass up, a chance to see how the upper echelons of society would react to..." "To what?" Jasmine interrupted, her voice trembling with anger and hurt. "To being deceived? To having their kindness exploited?" The gala had gone silent, all eyes on the unfolding drama. Alexander stepped forward, his face a mask of cold fury. "So this was all just an experiment to you? Jasmine's feelings, her reputation, none of that mattered?" Ethan's face crumpled with genuine remorse. "No, that's not. I never meant for it to go this far. Jasmine, please believe me. What happened between us tonight, the connection we felt, that was real." But Jasmine had heard enough. With tears threatening to spill from her eyes, she turned and fled the ballroom, leaving behind a stunned audience and a devastated Ethan. As the doors closed behind her, the gala erupted into chaos. Guests were talking over each other, some expressing outrage, others fascination at the unprecedented turn of events. Rebecca grabbed Ethan's arm, preparing to drag him away from the scene, but Ethan stood his ground, his eyes fixed on the doors through which Jasmine had disappeared. In that moment, he realized that in his pursuit of understanding human nature, he had lost touch with his own humanity. And in doing so, he might have just lost something, someone, truly precious. As the night's events spiraled out of control, one question hung in the air. Could anything salvage this situation? Or had Ethan's deception irreparably shattered the connection he and Jasmine had formed? The days following the gala were a whirlwind of media frenzy and personal turmoil. Jasmine had retreated to her family's estate in the Hamptons, shutting out the world as she grappled with the betrayal she'd experienced. Meanwhile, Ethan found himself at the center of a storm he had unwittingly created. News of the gala experiment gone wrong spread like wildfire. Talk shows, newspapers, and social media platforms were abuzz with discussions about ethics in social research, class dynamics, and the nature of deception. Ethan's academic career hung in the balance as Columbia University launched an investigation into his methods. Rebecca, despite her initial anger, stood by her husband as they navigated the public scrutiny together. She knew better than anyone the passion that drove Ethan's work, even if his methods had crossed a line this time. As for Jasmine, she found herself questioning everything. The connection she had felt with Ethan, was any of it real? Or was she just another data point in his experiment? The worst part was, despite the betrayal, she couldn't shake the feelings that had blossomed that night. A week after the gala, Jasmine finally emerged from her seclusion, steeling herself to face the public eye. She had made a decision. It was time to take control of the narrative. In a move that surprised many, Jasmine called a press conference. As she stood before the sea of cameras and microphones, she took a deep breath and began to speak. "Good morning. I'm sure you're all aware of the events that transpired at the Blackwood Foundation Gala last week. Today, I want to address those events and share some reflections." The room fell silent, all eyes on Jasmine as she continued. Dr. Ethan Moore's experiment, while ethically questionable, has inadvertently shed light on issues that we as a society often overlook. The ease with which we accepted his transformation from a perceived homeless man to a respected member of high society speaks volumes about our preconceptions and biases. Murmurs rippled through the crowd as Jasmine's words sank in. While I cannot condone the method, I cannot deny the impact. This experience has opened my eyes to the invisible barriers that exist in our society, the judgments we make based on appearance and status. Jasmine paused, her gaze sweeping across the room. As such, the Blackwood Foundation will be launching a new initiative focused on breaking down these barriers. We will be partnering with organizations that work with homeless individuals, providing not just resources, but opportunities for skills development and reintegration into the workforce. The announcement caused a stir among the reporters, cameras flashing rapidly. Furthermore, Jasmine continued, her voice growing stronger, "We will be establishing a research grant in collaboration with Columbia University's Sociology Department. This grant will fund ethical studies into social dynamics and class perceptions, with a focus on developing practical solutions to bridge societal divides." As Jasmine concluded her statement, the room erupted with questions. But one voice cut through the clamor, a familiar, deep voice that made Jasmine's heart skip a beat. "Ms. Blackwood," Ethan called out, having slipped into the back of the room unnoticed. "Your response to this situation is commendable, but I have to ask, can you ever forgive the personal betrayal you experienced?" The room fell silent once more, all eyes darting between Jasmine and Ethan. The tension was palpable as Jasmine met Ethan's gaze, seeing the genuine remorse in his eyes. Her response would not only determine the future of their relationship, but could also set the tone for how society viewed redemption and second chances in the face of misguided actions. As Jasmine opened her mouth to respond, the audience held its collective breath, waiting to see how this unexpected chapter in the unfolding drama would play out. The room hung in suspense as Jasmine considered Ethan's question, her eyes, filled with a mix of hurt and something deeper, locked onto his. "Dr. Moore," she began, her voice steady despite the emotion behind it. "Forgiveness is a complex journey, not a destination. While I cannot erase the pain of deception, I believe in the power of growth and redemption." Ethan's shoulders visibly relaxed, a glimmer of hope crossing his face. Jasmine continued, addressing not just Ethan but the entire room. "This experience has taught me that people are more than their worst mistakes. It's what we do after those mistakes that truly defines us." She took a deep breath before making an announcement that would shock everyone present. "That's why I'm inviting Dr. Moore to work with the Blackwood Foundation on our new initiative. His insights, coupled with a commitment to ethical practices, could be invaluable in our efforts to bridge societal divides." The room erupted in a cacophony of voices, some expressing surprise, others skepticism, and a few voicing outright objection. Jasmine raised her hand, calling for silence. "I understand this decision may be controversial, but if we're truly committed to breaking down barriers and challenging perceptions, we must be willing to practice what we preach. This collaboration will be closely monitored and held to the highest ethical standards." Ethan, visibly moved by Jasmine's words, stepped forward. "Ms. Blackwood, I don't know what to say. Your generosity is overwhelming. If you're willing to give me this chance, I promise to dedicate myself fully to making amends and contributing positively to this initiative." As the press conference concluded, the story took yet another unexpected turn. The public's reaction was mixed. Some praised Jasmine's forgiveness and vision, while others questioned her judgment. Social media was ablaze with debates about second chances and the ethics of redemption. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine and Ethan worked tirelessly to get the initiative off the ground. Their collaboration was closely watched, with many waiting for it to implode. But as time passed, something remarkable began to happen. Ethan's genuine remorse and dedication to the cause became evident. He threw himself into the work, leveraging his research skills and newfound perspective to develop innovative programs. Jasmine, for her part, found herself rediscovering the connection they had shared that fateful night at the gala, a connection built on mutual respect and a shared passion for making a difference. Their first project involved a series of workshops bringing together individuals from various socioeconomic backgrounds. The results were eye-opening, challenging participants, preconceptions, and fostering genuine understanding. As the initiative gained traction, Jasmine and Ethan found themselves spending more time together. Late nights poring over data, heated debates about program strategies, and shared moments of triumph as their efforts began to bear fruit, all served to deepen their bond. One evening, as they sat in Jasmine's office reviewing the latest project results, Ethan looked up at her, his eyes filled with admiration and something more. "Jasmine," he said softly, "I need you to know something. That night at the gala, when I told you our connection was real, that wasn't part of the experiment. It was the truest thing I've ever said." Jasmine met his gaze, her heart racing. She realized that somewhere along this journey of redemption, she had begun to fall for the real Ethan. Not the persona he had created, but the passionate, flawed, and ultimately good-hearted man she had come to know. As they leaned towards each other, both acutely aware of the line they were about to cross, a knock on the office door jolted them back to reality. Jasmine's assistant entered, looking flustered. "Ms. Blackwood, I'm sorry to interrupt, but there's been a situation with one of our program participants. It's urgent." The moment broken, Jasmine and Ethan exchanged a look that spoke volumes. Whatever was developing between them would have to wait. Right now, their work, their shared mission, had to come first. As they hurried out of the office to deal with the crisis, both Jasmine and Ethan knew that their journey was far from over. The path to redemption was long and fraught with challenges, but for the first time, they felt they were on it together. Little did they know that the biggest test of their newfound partnership and budding feelings was yet to come. As Jasmine and Ethan rushed to address the urgent situation with one of their program participants, they had no idea that this crisis would test the very foundation of their partnership and the initiative they had built together. The participant in question was Marcus, a formerly homeless man who had been one of the first success stories of their program. He had secured a job and housing through the initiative, becoming a poster child for what they hoped to achieve. However, Marcus had relapsed into drug use and was now in the hospital after an overdose. When Jasmine and Ethan arrived at the hospital, they were met with a scene of chaos. Marcus's family was there, distraught and angry. His sister, Lisa, confronted them as soon as they walked in. "This is your fault," she shouted, her eyes red with tears. "You gave him false hope. You made him think he could be something he's not. And when the pressure got too much, he turned back to drugs." Ethan stepped forward, his face etched with concern. "I understand you're upset, but I assure you, we did everything we could to support Marcus." "Ain't support," Lisa scoffed. "You don't know the first thing about supporting people like us. You're just using us for your experiments and to make yourselves feel good." Her words hit hard, especially for Ethan. They echoed the very criticisms he had faced after the gala incident. Jasmine noticed his discomfort and intervened. "We're truly sorry about what happened to Marcus," she said softly. "Please, tell us how we can help now." As they worked to stabilize the situation, arranging for Marcus's treatment and providing support to his family, Jasmine and Ethan were forced to confront some hard truths. Their initiative, while well-intentioned, had perhaps overlooked the deep-rooted, complex issues that couldn't be solved with just job placements and workshops. Back at the foundation, they called an emergency meeting with their team. The atmosphere was tense as they discussed the implications of Marcus's relapse. "We need to reevaluate our entire approach," Ethan said, pacing the room. "We've been so focused on the big picture, on changing perceptions, that we might have underestimated the individual struggles our participants face." Jasmine nodded, her brow furrowed in thought. "You're right. We need more comprehensive support systems. Mental health resources, long-term counseling, community building." As they brainstormed ways to improve their program, a new challenge emerged. News of Marcus's overdose had leaked to the press, and soon, the media was questioning the effectiveness of the Blackwood Foundation's initiative. Critics were quick to pounce, arguing that the program was naive at best and harmful at worst. Some even suggested that Ethan's involvement was tainting the Foundation's reputation, dredging up the controversy from the gala incident. It was a moment of vulnerability neither of them had allowed themselves to show until now. Ethan moved closer, taking her hand in his. "Jasmine, what we're trying to do here isn't easy. It's messy and complicated, and yes, sometimes we'll fail. But that doesn't mean we should stop trying." She squeezed his hand, drawing strength from his words. "You're right. But how do we move forward from this?" As they sat there, hands intertwined, they realized that this crisis was not just a test of their initiative, but of their relationship as well. The line between professional partnership and personal feelings had blurred, and they could no longer ignore the connection between them. But before they could address their growing emotions, they needed to find a way to salvage their work and regain the trust of those they were trying to help. As the first light of dawn crept through the office windows, Jasmine and Ethan began to formulate a plan, one that would require more transparency, humility, and commitment than ever before. Little did they know that their response to this crisis would not only shape the future of the Blackwood Foundation, but would also set the stage for a personal revelation that neither of them saw coming. In the wake of the crisis with Marcus and the subsequent media backlash, Jasmine and Ethan found themselves at a crossroads. They knew that their next steps would be crucial not only for the future of the Blackwood Foundation's initiative, but also for their own relationship. After days of intense discussion and soul-searching, they decided to take a bold and unconventional approach. Instead of trying to defend their program or deflect criticism, they chose to embrace transparency and accountability fully. Jasmine called for another press conference, but this time it was different. As she stepped up to the podium, Ethan stood beside her, a united front facing the world. "Good morning," Jasmine began, her voice steady despite the tension in the room. "We've called you here today not to make excuses or to defend our actions, but to acknowledge our shortcomings and share our plan for moving forward." She went on to detail the incident with Marcus, not shying away from the hard truths it had exposed about their program's limitations. Then, she did something unprecedented. She opened the floor to Marcus's sister, Lisa, inviting her to speak directly to the press about her family's experience. Lisa's raw, emotional testimony brought many in the room to tears. She spoke of the hope the program had given her brother, but also of the immense challenges that remained even after he had found employment and housing. When Lisa finished, Ethan stepped forward. "What happened to Marcus is a wake-up call," he said. "It's shown us that our approach, while well-intentioned, was incomplete. We failed to fully understand and address the complex, long-term support that individuals like Marcus need to truly transform their lives." Jasmine then unveiled their new plan, a complete overhaul of the initiative, developed in consultation with former participants, social workers, and mental health professionals. The new program would include long-term mentorship and support systems, comprehensive mental health and addiction recovery services, community building initiatives to create a network of peer support partnerships with local businesses and organizations for sustainable job opportunities, a transparent reporting system to track both successes and setbacks. But the most surprising announcement came last. "To ensure that we truly understand the challenges faced by those we're trying to help," Jasmine said, "Ethan and I will be stepping away from our current roles for the next 3 months. We'll be living in one of the communities we serve, working entry-level jobs, and experiencing firsthand the realities of the people in our program. The room erupted in shocked murmurs. This was an unprecedented move for someone of Jasmine's status, and for Ethan, it meant revisiting a world he had once pretended to be a part of, this time for real. As the press conference concluded, the public reaction was mixed, but largely positive. Many praised Jasmine and Ethan's willingness to admit their mistakes and take such a drastic step to improve their understanding and their program. In the weeks that followed, Jasmine and Ethan prepared for their immersion experience. They found a small apartment in a struggling neighborhood and secured jobs. Jasmine as a cashier at a local supermarket, Ethan as a janitor at a nearby school. The night before they were set to begin their new lives, they stood in their soon-to-be vacated offices, looking out over the city. "Are you ready for this?" Ethan asked, a mix of excitement and apprehension in his voice. Jasmine turned to him, a small smile on her face. "Honestly, I'm terrified, but I also feel like this is the most important thing we've ever done." As they gazed at each other, the tension that had been building between them for months finally reached a breaking point. Slowly, they leaned in, their lips meeting in a soft, tentative kiss. When they pulled apart, both were slightly breathless. "We should probably talk about this," Jasmine whispered. Ethan nodded, but before he could respond, his phone buzzed with a message from the transition team. Reality came crashing back in, reminding them of the challenge that lay ahead. "We'll have time to figure this out," Ethan said, gesturing between them. "For now, let's focus on the task at hand." Jasmine agreed, and as they left the office hand in hand, they knew that the next 3 months would change not only their initiative, but their lives in ways they couldn't yet imagine. As they stepped into the warm night air, ready to embark on their new journey, neither Jasmine nor Ethan could shake the feeling that this was just the beginning of something extraordinary.